If you're willing to shell out something like $27,000 on a watch, you can get a watch from H. Moser that has a vantablack watch dial. And vantablack is a really cool compound. It absorbs like almost all light. It just creates this incredibly deep, dark black hole effect. And that's something that I was really interested in because I've been seeing these other YouTube videos where people have experimented with the compound and it just is all kinds of crazy stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have $27,000. However, there's a much more affordable compound called Musou Black, which is a kind of commercially available black paint that absorbs almost as much light as vantablack. And micro brand Boldr decided to start experimenting with that to create much more affordable and accessible watches that also have very black watch dials. Today we're going to be checking out the Vogelkop Supreme, which is a black watch that has a Musou Black dial. And I'm pretty sure you've never seen a watch like this before. Hey guys, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave. I live in Japan and I love to collect affordable watches. So that's why it was so cool to see kind of an affordable version of these ultra black watches that the luxury brands have been playing around with and experimenting with. Now, Boldr is a really cool micro brand based out of Singapore. I really like what they've been doing on the design front. Their watches always have a very distinct feel. They go for original designs rather than rehashing a lot of vintage designs, and most of their watches have a very modern feel to them. And I think they're really stretching their wings a bit with this design in particular, naming it after a bird of paradise and doing a really kind of avant-garde style watch here. Now, at its heart, this watch is a 40mm dive watch. It's based off of a skin diver that Boldr has produced called the Safari. But this is unlike any other watch in the Safari line. It's got two funny little blue dots on the bezel, some blue hands, and not much else on it. So let's start by talking about the name because I think that will help to frame exactly what this watch is going for. This watch is named after the Vogelkop Supreme bird of paradise. That might not ring any bells, but once you see the bird, you might recognize it. This is a bird that during its mating dance, it puffs up its feathers in such a way that the whole thing looks like a black, deep black circle with two bright blue eyes and then a big bright blue area on the lower part of it. It's a pretty spectacular and crazy looking bird, but once you see the bird, you can really see the inspiration for this watch, and I think it's kind of translated well, and it's all going to make sense as we get into this review. Now, before we go any further, I do need to mention that Boldr did give me this watch to keep, which is why you saw the paid promotions flag in the beginning of this review. However, other than the watch itself, Boldr did not provide any compensation for this review, nor do they have input into the content of this review. So with that out of the way, let's dive in and see what this watch is all about. So this is an interesting watch. It features an extremely minimalist dial layout that is completely blacked out with no indexes or hour markings of any kind. And that in and of itself is not completely unique. There's a lot of watches that have this kind of a style. Among the most famous in recent memory would be the Movado Museum line. But generally this is reserved for things that are dress watches or more fashion pieces. But this watch from Boldr is clearly based on a very rugged skin diver. It features a 120 click unidirectional rotating bezel. You're getting 200 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown and a sapphire crystal. But it's clearly not a functional diver because it's very difficult to tell the time, much less to time dives or anything like that. So you have the form and the specifications of a dive watch, but you don't have the functionality of it. Instead, you take that dive watch platform and you go with something that is purely stylistic. So at first this is really puzzling, but it's also kind of cool. This watch is part of Boldr's relatively new Safari lineup, which contains field watches and dive watches and GMTs. They all share basically the same case design, but depending on the model, you might get a bezel or a GMT hand to kind of change the function of the watch around a bit. And this line is said to be inspired by the plains of Africa, the wildlife that live there, and the conservationists that work there. And so when you see that, it kind of makes sense that when Boldr was going around looking for a watch to apply this deep black dial to, I can see how someone at Boldr would make the connection between the Vogelkop Supreme bird of paradise and the Safari line of watches. The result is a very fun and playful watch that is also very sleek and minimalist and extremely rugged and durable all at the same time. And for this special entry in the Safari line, Boldr has deviated in a lot of ways from its kind of standard design elements. And for me, the most interesting new feature of this one is that Musou Black dial. That was really the main draw that got me interested in wanting to check out this watch, because I've been wanting to see what kind of effect that black paint would have on a watch dial. If I understand it correctly, Musou Black is the blackest commercial paint that is available. It is said to absorb 99.4% of visible light, which sounds pretty good, but the much more expensive vantablack compound absorbs 99.9% of visible light. And while I've never seen vantablack in person, it seems like that 0.5% does actually make a pretty big difference. Because from what I've read about vantablack, one of the cool things about it is that it essentially eliminates all shadows, which creates a kind of disorienting visual effect where you can't really tell the depth of something that's been coated in vantablack. And so one thing that I had kind of hoped to see on this Musou Black dial was the absence of shadows. However, if you're in any kind of a bright lighting situation, whether it's indoors or outdoors, you're going to see some shadows from the hands on the dial and from the sides of the case falling onto the dial of the watch. And if you can see a shadow, that means that some parts of the dial are going to look darker than others, and it will kind of break that perfect black illusion. That said, there are angles and lighting circumstances that you're going to find yourself in where the dial does completely disappear and you do catch a glimpse of that really cool, perfect black look that they're going for. But I didn't get it quite as often as I had hoped for. And that's not really Boldr's fault at all. That's just what you're going to get with this particular material and what you're going to be able to get at this particular price point. If you want a watch with a vantablack dial, you're probably going to have to pay H. Moser $27,000 for the privilege. So it's a very black dial, but it's not a perfectly black dial. But one thing that is very noticeable about this dial is it has a very matte texture. It does not have reflections at all. In bright lighting, it will look less black, but it's not going to catch the light and create a lot of glare like a reflective dial would or like a metallic dial would. And you'll really notice that with the handset, because the handset is also a matte black, but it's a metallic matte black, which does reflect a lot more light. So even though the hands are also black, you'll also get a lot of contrast between the black hands and the black dial, because the black dial is a lot less reflective than the hands are. For the color of the hands, Boldr has gone with a unique pale blue lume formulation. So we see blue lume all the time as far as the color of the glow, but this is actually the color of the lume itself in daylight. It's not a particularly vibrant shade of blue, but it is blue. And when the lights do go out, it is a very bright, vibrant blue. And this same lume formulation is also applied to the two dots on the bezel. And again, this all creates a very fun look that kind of references that Vogelkop Superb Bird of Paradise. Additionally, for the sapphire crystal, they've gone with what they call a super AR coating, and they're saying that this is double-sided. So I believe that means that they have AR coating on the top and bottom of the sapphire. And it does a very good job of cutting down on reflections, and I think that's a really cool thing with this dial on the watch. It does help you to appreciate how black that dial is, but you will have to be a little bit careful not to scratch the layer of AR coating on the top of the crystal. The sapphire crystal itself is scratch-proof, but the layer of AR coating on top of it is not, so you will be able to scratch it and put some lines on the crystal if you're not careful. And the final special feature of this watch is that Boldr has included what they call deep PVD coating, which is supposed to be an extra black coating on the watch. So it's supposed to be a deeper, darker black than you'll find on other PVD coated watches. And the case and bracelet is noticeably darker than what I've seen from other PVD coatings on other black watches. And it's really cool. So very cool looking watch, but can you actually use it as a watch? The lack of any hour or minute markers on the dial or the bezel does make it difficult to tell the time precisely, but it's not too hard to get an approximate estimation of what the time is. And you can also use the bezel kind of for timing things, but again, without any markings to speak of, it's just going to be approximate timings at best. So I would say this watch acts less as a functional timepiece and more as a kind of fashion accessory, a wearable piece of art, and a platform on which to show off some cool technical advances such as that Musou Black dial. And I do really like that Boldr used the Safari line as the basis for this piece. I think there is a crossover between people who are typically drawn more to tool watches and people who are also drawn to these ideas of ultra black paints and black PVD watches. It's more common to see these design cues applied to dress watches, but for a lot of guys, dress watches just aren't the style of watch that they would wear on a normal basis. Now, all that said, this has also made me a little bit more interested in the Safari line as a whole because I really like the way this watch wears and feels. It's not perfect, and I do have a couple of complaints that I'll get into in a minute, but overall, this is a very comfortable, easy to wear, well-built watch. The bezel is very easy to grip and get a hold of and has a very smooth action on it that's very pleasing to use. Likewise, the crown has that same grip to it that makes it very easy to screw and unscrew and set the time. And I really like the case design on this watch, where the lugs have a little bit of an outward flare to them that gives it a more elegant look than you typically see on tool watches, and especially more elegant than what you typically see from Boldr, which, most of their designs are very angular and kind of very tough looking. This is definitely a little bit of a softer look for them. And on the crown side of the watch, I love the way the lugs curve smoothly into the crown guards. This case design has a lot of personality to it. The bracelet is also very comfortable. The links are very small, so it's easy to get a pretty good fit on it. However, it was a little bit squeaky, which I assume is because of that black PVD coating, and perhaps after some break-in time that will wear down. It'll get a little bit quieter. The clasp is just okay. It feels maybe just a little bit cheaply made, but it does have a milled inner portion and some nice design work on it. It only has 3 micro adjusts, and I would have liked to have seen, maybe 4 or 5. So I think there is some room for improvement there. However, on the wrist, the watch is very comfortable. I do like these dimensions and the size and the weight. This is a really well-designed watch, and if you're not into this whole minimalist, no markings thing, definitely check out the other watches in the Safari line, because they have a really fresh feel to them. I definitely like that Boldr is sort of developing and evolving their own style rather than just going out and copying a lot of vintage watches. And I think that's something that really separates them from a lot of other micro brands out there. And I think that also does factor into the price of this watch. At around $450 for a watch with an NH35 movement inside of it, this is a bit on the high price for micro brand watches. If you were to get one of the standard versions from the Safari line, it would be about $410, so you're paying about $40 more for the Musou Black dial, the black PVD coating, the special lume, and all the other things that feature into this particular edition. So if you're only concerned about specifications, this watch isn't a particularly great deal, but it is a very fair price for what they're offering. The draw here is that design that they put into this watch. It's something that is unique. It's something that you're not going to get from a lot of those lower priced watches. And so I think the design is really the main draw to this watch. And that's a good thing. I think it's better to pay a little bit more for a design that really clicks with you, that really matches with your personality, rather than just saving money and going for a kind of more generic looking watch. So again, overall, I really like what Boldr's doing here. All right, drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of this watch. Let me know what you think of the design. Are you into these kind of ultra minimalist watches? Is this the kind of thing you would wear? Do you appreciate what Boldr is doing here? Also, if you're interested in picking up a watch themed t-shirt like this one here, you can get it on my website at justthewatch.com. That's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.